Thank you, Marguerite. And as you mentioned before, we have quite a full agenda today, so I'm going to hop straight into our first introduction. Living in Denmark and specialising in neuropaediatrics, Susanne Blichfeldt has over 30 years' experience working with children with developmental delays. Back to 1991, when she became closely involved with the Professional Providers and Caregivers Board. Susanne has visited many countries and presented at countless conferences regarding PWS, guiding families and training staff at kindergartens, schools, and Prader-Willi syndrome group homes. Susanne has 2 sons. Her youngest son is 40 and lives with Prader-Willi syndrome. Susanne?
So the presentation was to support the young families, but I think one more important thing is to stress that it is the child, first of all, to support. And then, I should try to keep the time, but I think it's a very, very big subject. And I think also it was quite difficult to prepare, but well, this presentation will both be about the family situation and the child, and not so much about medical problems, but you are very welcome after my presentation to ask about medical issues. So who is involved when the child is born? Well, first of all, the child, and then the family, parents, siblings, grandparents, and then all the professionals. Many will be involved during the years: doctors, nurses, dietitians, physiotherapists, and so on. And then also the social advisors in the town, depending on how support is organized in the country. And then later come the educators, the caregivers in kindergarten, school. So many people will be involved. So to support the child, I think things to be aware of is that the child with Prader-Willi has many possibilities and a lot of potential. And the child also has limitations. So what to do with the knowledge that we have today is, I think, most important: respect the child, respect the disease, and then focus on potential. And then I think the most important thing is information. That is the key word. And this is also my personal experience, so that all involved know what to do and why, both about food, stimulation, and education in social rules and contacts. This is a difficult point for many children with Prader-Willi. So I think it's so important to teach the child from the very beginning the rules for behavior. And then when you have to inform neighbors, grandparents, then you need a few words, not long explanations, but tell Prader-Willi is a congenital disease, and most symptoms are caused by a hypothalamic or brain dysfunction. And I think it's so important to stress that it is a brain dysfunction. It's not just bad behavior or something that the mother did wrong during pregnancy. It's a congenital thing. It came just suddenly. So feelings of hunger and satiety are abnormal. And we see that the newborn has no wish to eat, and later a drive to eat too much. And then also stress, because people will ask, there's no medication for that at the moment. And also general development is delayed, but there's a lot of potential. And the child really needs our help, and we can do it. You can do it, we can all do it. And the child is friendly of nature, stress that, and will stay happy and healthy with our help. And then also we know that behavioral problems can arise, and especially with misunderstandings and changes of routines. Well, about the food, because there's so much talking about the food, how to avoid the overweight. Well, security about food for the rest of the life, to avoid speculations about food. I think that's most important for the child. So the child knows that everybody knows his condition. What kind of food I can have and how much. I shall always be served the food I need at meals, only be served at meals. And we never skip a meal. I always have my servings. At parties, I shall be served my food. And no one, I think so important, is permitted to give the child extra food. In the kindergarten, have a food ready for the child with parties, because if you give a surprise, it will always be expected next time, and it stresses and gives confusion. And what more about food? It's so important to secure a diet or meals with all essential proteins, fat, and carbohydrates, because special diets can create malnutrition and later diseases. And the dietitian and doctor must know Prader-Willi, and if they do not, they can go to the IPWSO website. So it is so important to be aware of the relative low calorie needs for a child. It is less than others, and it is because the child moves less and has a small lean body mass. And what is that? It is small muscles, smaller muscles than other children of the same age, and therefore small muscles use less calories than big muscles. So just you can start with 8 kilocalories per centimeter height, or you can tell the dietitian that most children with Prader-Willi will have a need of about 80% of calories than normal children, but it's mostly because the child does not move so much when the child is young. And then also be aware that growth hormone does not change the calorie needs so dramatically. So is it possible? Yes, if you can accept the conditions. It is not difficult for the child. It's more difficult for everybody else. Parents, siblings, sometimes especially grandparents, teachers, neighbors. So you can give an example to use for explanation. For example, say, if the child has diabetes, you will always ask the parents which food is allowed. But in Prader-Willi, it's more complicated. It can be difficult because the child has a drive for eating. And I think it's important to stress it's not hunger, because the child has had his food. But when the child hears discussions about food, it means hope, and it gives stress for the child. So most important, again, keep the rules and the security, and then the child will relax. And you cannot say, if you have the cake, you skip the roller or the bun or the slice of bread that you usually have for your afternoon serving. It gives confusion and tantrums and, well, crying. So I just want to show from my own family, this is a happy boy. When he was 3, he could not walk yet. He only started growth hormone when he was 4. Well, but he knew at that time he had his food, and he did not speculate very much about it. And I still think we have the same situation now. He is now 40, and this photo is 2 years old. But he can relax, and he can enjoy his contact with animals, walk the dogs, and he knows that the next meal will be served. Perhaps he will ask sometime what's for dinner, but dinner will be served like in a restaurant, and he knows that. So do not say it's impossible, but it is demanding. You have to skip many of your social habits. For example, at parties, when the child has finished his or her serving, then my advice is take the child to the room where the other children are playing and stay there and be sure that the child is involved in the play. Because if you let the child sit at the table, it gives hope for another serving, and especially if you gave last time. And if it's not given, it's a torture for the child. And then you have crying. And usually the child does not leave the table by herself if food is still available. I think you all listening here, you have older children, so you know this. I'm sorry that there are not so many families here today with younger children. Well, beside food, motor development is important. Have good advice for stimulation, and the child will develop. Always tell the families that the child will develop and have the same milestones as others. sit, crawl, walk, run. So we always stimulate for the next step when we are doing motor training. And the physiotherapist can give good advice, even if the physiotherapist has not seen a child with Prader-Willi before, because the physiotherapist knows children with delayed motor development. And then for language, it's so important. Singing, dancing, you can dance with a child in your arms, show pictures, tell stories, and then also make some motor exercises for the mouth, blowing, face movements, and so on. And then for a child with Prader-Willi, social rules can be so difficult to understand, but it can be learned, like small children. Learn to take turns, queuing, eat at table, eat only when all are served, and then learn to say thank you. Behavior problems we know can arise, and I think most often because of misunderstandings or the child's fantasy. The child understood or expected something to happen, and it was not what was planned actually in the family. And then also insecurity. I have an example when I just said once to my son, we go for a walk. Then he started crying because in his head, how far, where will I get my lunch? So you have to tell we're going there and prepare. And another example, tomorrow theater. There was a girl, she was 7. She came home to the mother and said, they say in school we go to theater tomorrow. I think I die. She did not know what theater was, and perhaps she also speculated, will I get my lunch? So be sure that the child understood. Use pictures, always use pictures and not words alone. So life is easiest with routines and preparations for change. And then the family. That was the topic for today. For the parents, the child came unexpectedly. It was not the dream child, and then there's a child that's lost. A child is dead, you can say. And then you have a new task or a new job, because Prader-Willi is something unknown, and it creates fear for the family. And what about the future? And I think here also many families speculate so much about the future, and they will never do that with a normal newborn child. So here they are using very much time searching for information on the internet, and it takes time. Time that you do not spend with a child or your other children or your partner. And grandparents, they are sorry. They lost a grandchild, but they are also very sorry for the future of their son and daughter. And neighbors and friends, it can be difficult, it can be a help. Sometimes they do not know what to say, they keep away, or worse, give silly advice. But some listen and can be a great help. So support for parents and siblings. There is so much to learn about Prader-Willi, and it's overwhelming. But the best is, I think, with a young child to concentrate on what to focus on now and how you can help the child. Be careful not to believe all you see on the internet. Better trust IPWSO, because that's true what's written there. Have the possibility to talk about the sorrow together and with friends. And siblings. Give information from the beginning about Prader-Willi, because I have met many families who did not want to tell the siblings that the child had a special condition. Be realistic. And the siblings, they will accept if they know the truth. And then, so important, Prader-Willi is not their fault, because small children will always think, is it my fault that my mother had a baby with a special condition? It's never your fault, and it's not the siblings' responsibility. But again, in a family, we can all help each other. So support for grandparents. Have the correct information again. Grandparents and others, it can be the most important help if they accept the condition. They can take over, they can give parents some free time, and you can make a plan for the months. Have the other siblings at home separately, have the child with Prader-Willi alone, and serving sweets and cakes, that's not the condition. Serve the right food and then have correct information about the food, of course, and then tell the parents, giving your time, your patience, your playing with the child, your stimulation, this is the best gift you can give. And the parents, they do not have so much time as you have. And then the professionals and the family. Most doctors, neonatologists, endocrinologists, they do not know Prader-Willi and do not blame them. Create a good atmosphere. The physiotherapist can help. They know floppy children with other diseases. But please tell the physiotherapist also about the food. I have met cases where the child had a cake every time they visited the physiotherapist because the physiotherapist thought that the child was so nice. But then again, the child expects only the cake and not the motor exercises. Teachers, social workers, most often they have never heard about it. So conditions vary a lot for families, but again, parents are the experts and be confident with yourself. So whenever your child goes to new places, give and show information. Information is possible in many languages and also for medical persons. So the child, of course, about medical, I do not tell very much about the medical things, but it's just to stress, and we all know that the child needs regular visits at doctors, nurses, etc. And to secure all possible symptoms in Prader-Willi are looked for. It's the food and weight management, relation of vision, joints, etc. And then the blood test for hormone deficiency, thyroid, growth hormone. And then again, stress, food and weight management is much more important than growth hormone, to my opinion. So what is the most difficult here? It's the denial of the diagnosis in the family, friends, if your partner also denies. Advice that is not useful about food, behavior that neighbor or someone else or the grandparents perhaps give. Always to be strong, always to have a plan, and always support the siblings, always think about them. They can also be sad, especially if they are teenagers or adults. Sometimes it's a late coming child and you have already adult children on beforehand. They can be very sad. And then also it can be difficult to trust that others can take over. And the best, to see the child develop, to see the child being happy, to know the child is healthy, and to see the siblings care for the child, and to know that you are doing the best you can. And then again, trust, there's so much information available to secure the best for the child. So I hope Mikkel, my son, is here at the party of his brother's 40 years old birthday. This is 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yes, that's that. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much, Susanne.